morning, everybody. This is Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we continue our discussion on emotions and have quite a few things that I want to just kind of present to you. But before we do that, anyone have anything they'd like to throw out? Questions, comments, anything? Nope. All right, then when last we left our chat, we were talking about three different diagrams that that Joseph had sent over, and I think we pretty much finished the one we were trying to resolve why the defensive mechanism that would be triggered if you were very far downgrid would be humiliate, and where we ended up was that there'd be multiple choices at all of these extremes because these are all actually the exact same point. They're the powerless point. And humiliate could be one of those things that if I was not under a true physical threat, I might very well do as a way of winning. And so again, remember to be this far downgrid. You view your level of ability as being very, very high, the perceived challenge as being very, very low. You think you're a master of whatever that content is, that understanding, that data, whatever. And if someone was attacking you, the intellectual thing, and challenging your intelligence, if you were that far downgrade, one of the ways you may choose to defend yourself is to basically demonstrate exactly how much you know and humiliate the living daylights out of whoever had the nerve to even question your intelligence. This is not without its cost. So we also talked about that in a sales situation. Very often the sales professional knows far, far, far more than the prospective customer knows about their situation or about whatever the remedies are and how effective they are. But we do all occasionally meet that customer who thinks they know more than we know about our life's work. And so part of you wants to just give them the what for, but you know, diplomacy has to come into play if you ever hope to win that person over to your way of thinking and turn them into a client. But nevertheless, the more I thought about it, the more I went like, yeah, I could certainly see how one of the ways that I would, it's actually more of a verbal fight than a physical fight. But one of the ways that I might react to that kind of a situation is to do my very best to humiliate the daylights out of that person. Um, if there was a true physical threat, this is where freeze lives. Just do nothing. Stay put is your absolute best defense. And that's why, you know, using other language for that, that's why if you guys ever go on a trip to Alaska and you want to go hiking in any of the national parks, scratch that, any of the state parks. By the way, some of these state parks are physically larger than some of the states in the US. We're talking about massive amounts of land. You have to go through a little 20-minute orientation to critters in the wilderness and what to do if you encounter a bear and all that sort of a thing. And one of the things that they tell you is that you cannot outrun a bear, you cannot outclimb a bear. The only thing you can do is play dead. And so that's the whole idea about freezing. Just act like you're dead, and dead is downgrid. So usually if it's truly a life and death situation, it would be our little fourth F, and that's to freeze. But if the attack is something a little bit less physically threatening, well, then I can certainly see how humiliate would come into play. Any thoughts about that? Questions, comments about that? All right. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is just very quickly show you some diagrams. As I said on the last time around, or we've kind of discovered as we went through several of these models, with the exception of only one, all of these models seem to just be ways of organizing emotions in some creative, graphical sort of way. So I would say these, instead of being viewed as maps of humanity, just view them as simple infographics. So someone took the time to figure out, how can I better arrange these? Now, some of these arrangements of emotions divide the world of emotions into 6 categories. And by the way, they all refer to these as emotion wheels or feeling wheels or whatever. So no one owns that label, and nothing, there's not a sacred one. Okay, so they say that the 6 would be anger, fear, love, joy, surprise, and sadness. And again, we're always looking for continuity as we move our way around any sort of a map of humanity. If it's a proper map, as we move around on the map, there should be subtle but noticeable, perhaps even sometimes profound differences from one spot to another. And they should be arranged in some logical way that would indicate that you're on a continuum or multiple continua at the same time. In this particular case, I would say to you that being, let's go here, scared and peaceful are not neighbors. Fear and love are not neighbors. Frightened and satisfied, these are not neighbors, if you know what I mean. It's like you don't make a subtle change to your emotional state and move from being satisfied to frightened. There's a lot of nuances between those sorts of things. And so it's an interesting way to have organized these things, but it really doesn't hold the requirement for the continuity to be a map. If it was continuity, we'd also be looking for opposites. Is the opposite of fear surprise? I don't think so. Is the opposite of love sadness? Maybe. But joy and anger? I don't know. I don't think so. So are we in agreement? This is a lovely little diagram, but it's not a map of humanity.
Well, I think it'd be, or the T, this is Jane. I think it'd be interesting to maybe try to create those, try to, make those opposites and
Mhm.
see if you rearranged it with those being opposites, would you come closer to that?
Exactly. And I think that that's if I scroll into, all right, where's my little magnifier? Click. Why can't all software work identically? Um, I think that if when we start looking at the adjective map, that's our opportunity to say, where do these opposites go? Based on the emotions we've already plotted on the adjective map, where would the rest of them fall? And so hopefully that's where we're going to end up at some point in time. But yeah, that's definitely what we want to do, because sometimes to turn an infographic into a map, we can do some rearrangements. We can do some manipulations to the way things are being positioned, and now they fit. So, but I know as it is right now, this would not overlay on the change grid. Nevertheless, every one of these emotions occurs somewhere on the change grid. Now, I think that all feeling wheels are used the same way. You're talking to your client and go like, so how you feeling? What's going on? Whatever. And somewhere along the line, they share with you one of these words. And so they say, well, I'm in a state of panic. I feel helpless. Or then they want to work your way inward. So helpless is scared. What are you scared of? And then somehow or another, they move you into deeper into the core emotion of fear to explore that. And I don't, okay, yay, but I don't know how I would use that. Or if they just said, oh, I'm feeling sad. Well, which of these words might get a little more, pardon me, specific about what's at the core of your sadness? And then you move out a little bit further and go like, okay, it's about this. So I'm very sad. Despair works for me. Is about being in grief or powerless. And so I can understand how, in the hands of a coach or a therapist, having a feeling wheel could be a very useful tool to help someone get, I want to say, more specific languaging around whatever it is they happen to be experiencing. Now, again, this is a 6 type wheel. I don't want to spend a lot of time on these because you're going to see they're all more similar than they are different. But this next one, we move up, and yeah, we can't really read it all that well because things are getting a little bit um, distorted. But this is 7 types. So anger, fear, surprise, happy, sad, disgust. Oh no, that's another variation on 6. But these are different. And these, as you move to the center ring and the outer ring, are different as well. If I go to the next one, this is the 7 type. Yeah, fearful, bad. Bad is an emotion. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that. Fearful, bad, surprised, happy, sad, disgusted, and angry. Again, I don't see any kind of a continuum. There is some sense of continuum between happy and surprised. Maybe I could make a case for playful and excited. maybe shocked and unfocused, but lonely and optimistic down here between sad and happy, those are definitely not neighbors. So again, an interesting arrangement, I'm sure used in a very similar sort of a fashion, but there you are. Again, any comments about any of these as we work our way through them, or are they just feeling like variations and expansions on the same sort of theme?
This is Jane again. I think there are variations on the same theme, but one of the things that I've got from a coach one time was, well, if you're not very good at identifying your emotions,
Right.
you have a very narrow range of language for emotions. These can be really helpful because
Yeah.
you probably I feel really bad. Okay, well, that's what's this, what's that. And what's really helpful is the metaphor that they used was, imagine that your emotions are a string or like a braided rope. So
Hmm.
rather than just saying, I feel bad, try to go out into the braids and tease apart each one of the braids that
Hmm.
go with each one of the emotion, each one of these emotions. So whichever model you landed on, I think it would be really interesting if you to rearrange these in a way that makes sense, and that the
Hmm.
adjacent ones between categories, are kind of a blend, because if that's what you're using it for, to help tease
Right. Right.
out finer degrees of awareness around your emotions so
Mm.
you can work on them, that would be helpful.
I think you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and certainly again, if I had no other evidence, the fact that so many of these infographics exist tell me that people find benefit in them, and so they are using them. I think you're right; they're using them exactly as you've described. I found some as I did this that were definitely directed towards children who have more limited vocabularies, more limited ranges of expression, and so that was interesting. And then I saw one that had to be for the professionals because it had very psycho technical sorts of identifiers all around it. So the concept has been used very effectively. I thought at first when I was looking at the way these were arranged is that at the center I was looking at a core emotion, and that was its strongest expression. And as I moved away from the core, I was seeing a weaker expression, and then an even weakest, weaker expression on the far outside. And it's like, no, this is really just a collection or an arrangement of words. It's not about intensity in them, although some are certainly, I'm sure, experiences being more intense than others, but that's not the purpose of the diagram. So
Can I add something to that?
please do.
Yeah, so this is Brian. And to Jane's point, something that I learned from a neuropsychologist is exactly what you just described. And they used to always say how the experience of the experience matters. And so it seems like to me, these labels are, if I'm fearful, and then they start to use the process of inquiry, they're helping them to describe how they're actually experiencing being fearful.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
so then you can kind of reverse engineer that process and change the frame, using some kind of maneuver and get them out of that experience towards what they want. Because it's like sometimes when you ask people when they're experiencing something and you ask them, what is it that you want? They can readily go to the negative because that's close to them and that's what they're
Mhm,
actually
mhm,
experiencing. But
mhm.
what they really want is a solution. And so if they can't describe the experience, it's quite difficult to actually change it for yourself. So you have to change the frame.
That's really very interesting. And so as you were explaining, I was going like, well, I wonder if you attempted to rearrange these based on that principle, how would the diagram look different? So have you seen any infographics that would demonstrate what you've just described?
I haven't actually. I think um, in medical industry, they just use like when asking a patient how they're feeling, they just have kind of a little diagram, maybe 9, no,
Mhm.
10 like expressions.
Okay.
And that's, yeah, I feel number one, or and then go all the way up to number 10, but I haven't seen anything like this. I think something like this might be beneficial, but I don't know
Yeah.
what's
Well, I'll
going.
tell you as I check in with you guys more and more about, do you know of any maps that there is continuity? And obviously we've done extensive searching, haven't found anything. That tells me that putting a little bit more energy into the adjective map could
Mhm.
prove to be a very useful tool for people that are in any of the helping kinds of
Absolutely.
professions. So, and yeah, okay. So we'll look deeper into that. Now, one other thing that I want to say about all these emotion wheels is that we always have to appreciate that the wheel is culturally and language specific. So you go into a different culture, you step into a different language, and you may find that some of these words don't even exist or they mean something different. So for example, Linda and I are part of a French club. We speak enough French to get by. I can tell you that in French, they have words for good and bad, and they have a word for better, but it really is just more good. So it's plus bien. So it's, and then they have a word for best. It's meilleur. They have no word for worst.
Hmm.
So you can just go bad and more bad, but there is nothing beyond that to express the degree of bad something could be. So there is no, we have superlatives there. That language doesn't have a full set of superlatives. And we've talked about this infinite times on our French club. It's like, how are you missing that word? How do you not have an occasion where you need that word? They just don't. They just say, it's more bad. So I think, we have to factor that in. So even if I said, how are these things interpreted as we go about arranging them on an adjective map, we do have to appreciate that while we refer to these as maps of humanity, those maps can shift, not profoundly, but shift slightly based on the culture, based on the language. And by the way, some people also said it's also based on the intellect of the person that you're working with. So so there you go. All right, let me show you another one. This one we'll take a look at a little bit more deeply soon, but they said, oh no, there's 8 of these. I do like this one when it comes to a simple diagram because I like the appreciation that at least there's some vectors that are involved. Now the vertical vector, high arousal, the bottom one would obviously be low arousal. That's a continuum. Thank you for that. But positive and negative aren't really a continuum that we can plot on the change grid. And if we did plot it, it would be a radial trend, positive being in the center and negative being at the extremes or at the other pole. So we could do that, but it couldn't be depicted in this flat sort of a configuration. And though they don't have quite as many, so for each one of their 8, they come up with 3 more. But as I look at these, that they're saying all of these are about energize, renew, burnout, stress. So negative is either going to be about stress or burnout. Positive feelings are either going to energize us or renew us. That feels almost overlayable. So it'll be interesting when we look at the adjective map to go, is there an area of the change grid where we would say that's definitely where energize lives? You guys want to just throw out a top of mind thought about where on the change grid energize might live?
Uh, Looking at these words, this is Brian, at these words that they have, they're like confident,
Yeah.
things like that. That seems in power.
In power, yeah. So, and don't know how far out grid this list would stretch, but definitely I think that it would overlay on power. Again, I think everyone on the call knows what the basic diagram looks like, so I don't need to switch over there. Stress, where would you put that one?
Yeah, that's definitely upgrade.
More up grid, but boy, it seems really far up grid.
Yes.
If it starts with angry and anxious and then gives you these variations, that's very far upgrade. And if I just did that shift, that would then tell me that energize is more like, if we looked at the energy diagram, the 16 different energies, this would be like the expressive driver driven expressive energy. So now we go positive, more the bottom here. Renew, touched, appreciated, loving, trusting, peaceful, thoughtful, calm, placid. I'm feeling kind of in the middle.
Yeah, that seems the middle as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. And when I look over here at burnout, guilty, embarrassed, I'm seeing a lot of upgrade sorts of stuff here. So if I said, if we simply rotate this 90 degrees and put it in the upper half of the change grid, would that overlay? Can you guys do that conceptually? Let me just bring up a composite change grid.
Would the
You-
burnout be in grid?
The burnout would be in grid, but see, where would plot if we said, no, their idea of what they've just said is stress is very much in the upgrade danger zone. And
Mhm.
what they're saying about energize is over here.
Mhm.
What they say about renew is, is closer to the PowerPoint. And what they say on the burnout would be over here. That feels like it would map. So I could almost just overlay their four things at these four corners of the expressive quadrant. Doesn't that feel both interesting and incomplete at the same time? Well, wouldn't you go like, all right, and again, this could just be my wacko mind. Again, they're adjusting my medication, so that could be the complete answer to why this is coming to my head. But if those four they describe this upper one, well, where are the ones that describe outgrid? Where's we got to complete the set? How can we sleep until the set is complete? You know, so what would be the ones that would go in grid and down grid? So that's why I said this one, I think, has some real interesting elements to it, but where does it plot? Where does it plot? So
It does seem incomplete in comparison to the others that were, more dynamic in terms of
yeah, yeah,
the experience of those labels they had.
that's right. That's right. That being said, I think I could overlay this in the upper quadrant, in the upper
Mhm.
quadrant. So anyway, that means, oh, we might want to do a deeper dive on that one. Now, just to kind of continue our little progression here, the next one, I know you can't read this, I'll zoom in as you get the concept, but over here on the right, that says feelings when your needs are met. And over here is feelings when your needs are not met. Sounds alarmingly like positive feelings and negative feelings, doesn't it? So I kind of get that. They haven't bothered giving us any kind of a vertical sort of a what the continuum may be, but they've come up with 12 types. And let me kind of zoom in enough and see. Again, I don't think this is talking about intensity as you move away. I think they're just organizing these different reactions, but they had 12 of them. Angry, disgusted, afraid, surprised, sad, ashamed, peaceful, loving, trusting, intrigued, joyful, and proud. Proud and ashamed are opposites. Angry and peaceful. Now, because let's look at these words in parentheses. And again, I think that's as far in as I can zoom. Yeah, I'm up at 400%. So proud, they refer to as self-acceptance, and ashamed is self-judgment.
Mm.
Okay, I would say those are opposites.
Mhm.
So far, okay. Angry is judgment, and peaceful is acceptance. So that must be a judgment of external sorts of things. And peaceful is acceptance. Again, internal sorts of things or external sorts of things. All right. Let's go. Joyful is about gain and sadness is about loss.
Mm.
I'm like, all right, that's interesting. That's interesting. Intrigued is about being attentive, and surprised is about being caught off guard. I'm going like, how many of you are kind of going like, no, that's interesting. This is interesting. because there's an attempt being made to arrange these things in a way that would lead to a continuum.
Yeah.
Afraid, the opposite of being afraid, threatened, is trusting. Trusting is about feeling secure. And the opposite of love is disgust. I can go there. Disgust is about being repulsed by someone or some situation, and love is about attraction. Obviously, they're talking about that particular definition of love or aspect of love. Attraction goes, and you look at all these other words they're coming up with. So caring might be getting close to that. So I go like, all right, this feels like it has some merit. But this I know, ashamed and peaceful are not neighbors on a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And angry and proud, these are not neighbors. Proud and joyful, maybe. I don't know how grateful would lead to being engaged, maybe fascinated and trans. So I don't think these are arranged in that level of specific, what do I say, nuance, progression. I don't feel that, but I appreciate the opposites. It's almost like if you just folded the diagram in half, you still couldn't, it wouldn't do anything.
Well,
No.
if you
Yeah.
go from side to side, like confident, affectionate, like between loving and trusting out on the wheel, at least those are in the same, well, that would be like folding it on half. I think where you run into problems is like between harmonious and humiliation.
Yeah, exactly. Where I can see caring and content,
Mhm.
tenderness and satisfied, because again, these are all when your needs are being met. That's what all these have in common.
Yeah.
And on the other side, it's when your needs are not being met. This is what you're all feeling. So I can certainly see how a therapist would use this. Because they could say, oh, I'm feeling startled. Okay, well, then I know your feelings are not being met, but feelings in what? You were surprised by something. And what do we need to cultivate to help you? Can we help you move from surprised to intrigued? So instead of being, and again, this I spoke of the Buffalin maneuver. The Buffalin maneuver is a way of getting yourself out of the limbic system and up into your cognitive faculties, and you just pause for a moment and go, "How very interesting." So if I stop for a second and said, "Whatever's distracting me, overwhelming me," or whatever, I go like, "Well, isn't this interesting?" Well, now I've just moved into being a bit more intrigued about it than caught in the feelings of being off guard. So I can certainly see how this could be used. The fact that they've used these kinds of facial expression as illustrations tell me that this is targeted towards a particular kind of relationship between professional and an individual, or maybe this is just about self-awareness. We would not expect to see these kinds of illustrations in a in a purely professional to professional map of understanding. Am I right? You guys agree with me?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is definitely a tool for interaction. Oh, why look, finally, someone decided to give us some information based on nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg. It may be duplicated for personal use in teaching nonviolent communication. Thank you. Feelings are internal emotions. Words mistaken for emotions, but that are actually thoughts in the form of evaluations and judgments of others, are any words that follow I feel like, I feel that, I feel as if, I feel you, such as, and then gives us a bunch of other ones. So that's interesting. Nonviolent communication, again, you guys know I've did a lot of training in common ground. This is probably something we would have used if we're meeting people in conflict to help them work their way around this.
Yeah, I've seen
So,
something like this in anger management classes for the foster care children that I used to deal with. And they would, go around and see different expressions that they believe represent how they're actually feeling in a moment. And then they'll talk about that experience and how can they change it. So they
sure.
were trying to move beyond, a lot of times you go to those things and they say, well, yeah, well, just the count to 10, as if that's going to help anyone do anything. And it
Yeah,
doesn't.
right. Yeah. a minor downgrid maneuver, but it's not going to change much of anything. Yeah, I mean, I think this is interesting because, you know, on the last call, I mentioned to you guys that we're having the developers add a piece of functionality. They got back with us and said sometime next week we'll be ready to test it, but this will allow us to create change grids, have people complete the change grid, and then they will immediately receive their response, their result. Now, you would then use that as a tool for marketing or for whatever, you know, other creative purposes that you have in mind, because we would be saying, okay, you guys need to be doing some videos, or I'll co-create videos with you where we're interpreting it. And I said the first one I want to put up there for John Q. Public to fill out has to do with what no doubt, you know, most are a bit less than half of the population is likely to experience after the election. Don't know which group it's going to be, but there's going to be some happy people. There's going to be some upset people. And isn't it interesting when we go like, can we put together a change grid that helps people to restore relationships, to get past whatever the emotional impact is? I mean, let's look at the negative side here. Might they be angry? Sure. Disgusted, afraid, surprised, sad, ashamed. I definitely feel like we're going to be encountering some or a combination of those things in our clients and in our you know, friends and family members. If we can use this as a little bit of a structure to help people now go, well, we need to find the positive, or help them find the positive in the negative situation. And we might also need to caution the people who are now feeling all the positive emotions that they need to be subtle, gentle, diplomatic, understanding of the people in their life who would be experiencing the negative side of what's going on here. Thoughts about that, anyone?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that would be good.
Yeah. So yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to deploy that by the election.
they don't
And
have relieved on there.
yeah, where would relieved go? You know, I guess we'd go somewhere into peaceful.
Peaceful, yeah.
Yeah, comfortable, serene, hardly. That's a bit of a big goal to be looking for. But you know, can we all just get along?
Are you familiar with positive organization scholarship? Have you ever heard of that?
No,
That's
tell
a
us about it.
branch now of positive ethics. So, you know, like Dr. Is it Seligman at
Seligman for positive psychology. Yeah.
right. So they formed this whole field now that's quite emerging in terms of positive ethics, because they say a lot of times in organizations, when it comes to conflict, everything's about fixing something. And
Mm.
so if you start with the positive, that people are more apt to get involved and take ownership and accountability of their own behaviors and how they're experiencing things and how they're feeling it. So now there's this positive organization scholarship that looks at a range of feelings in terms of human agency. So I just got the handbook, the Oxford Handbook of Positive Organization Scholarship, and it's quite interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. And I know Linda has been going through training in recent weeks with a group called Brighter Angels. And Brighter Angels, when you really hear what their curriculum kind of covers, it resonates very much with Common Ground, or any of the programs that are all about conflict resolution, restoring, that sort of mediation sorts of practices. It aligns very much with that, but it's very much talking about how can you go about healing, and you know, finding that common ground, finding that common cause. And that, so I think we're going to see a greater need for that within a very short number of weeks. And I think it's very important for all of us and everyone who's in the realm of human development to be prepared to help that situation, both from a humanitarian perspective, but also from a business opportunity that it represents.
Mhm.
And so you got to believe you're going to start hearing a lot of stuff being shared. And they said, I forget where I read this yesterday, but someone of renown. In fact, it was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So let's say that gives it at least some gravitas to what's going on. But they said that because of COVID, because of everything else that's been going on, et cetera, they now believe that over 40% of the population of the United States is experiencing moderate to severe depression.
Yep.
That's likely to get worse, not get better. And so they're talking about how right now, while we're looking for vaccines and all that, and we're trying to cure all that ails us on every level you can think of, we need to help people become more resourceful for themselves. So if we can do anything to impart a skill set that someone can use to just help themselves navigate what they're feeling. Otherwise, they said people will continue on a very strong, predictable downward spiral.
Yeah, in fact, it's a public health issue or concern
Yeah,
at
yeah,
this point right now.
that's right. Linda, you've unmuted. You want to say something about Brighter Angels or Better Angels? What?
Yeah, it's braver
Braver
angels.
Angels. Thank you. Sorry.
Ah,
Yeah, they were called Better Angels after President Lincoln's speech when he had to bring the country together when he did the Emancipation Proclamation. And the country was divided in 5 distinct, here were, two amazing separations. And he had the country in 5 different ones, and he had to bring everybody together during the Civil War. And his speech was called the Better Angels. Somebody already had that name, so they had to change it to Braver Angels. But what you said is correct. What they're doing is they're putting together all different kinds of classes, polarizing within, something you can do for yourself to find out where you are and how you can move. The one we're doing this Saturday is nationwide, and there's one in our state here in Arizona. It's workshops. They give you little videos to watch beforehand, and then you actually practice the skills they're teaching to be able to have depolarizing conversations, or at least conversations where you can try to understand somebody else.
And these are free, right?
The buildings, they're all free. That one's called Building Skills for the Divide. And then they have a huge plan for the day after the election. And they also have a huge plan for going forward with toward the inauguration. So, and there's so many, even the League of Women Voters has huge plans in place for before and after the election, helping people.
Wonderful.
wow.
So if any of you are interested in that, just send Linda an email and she can send you whatever links and resources you might want to be looking at. But, again, just to bring my point home, all of these things that are happening are speaking to a huge need that we're going to have to be ready to address. And if we aren't the people who have to be addressing it, who is? So I think it's very, very important that all of us in the line of work that we do whatever we can in the next few weeks to just not only get more prepared to do it, but to find a way to let people know that we have, things available to them. Alfred, you go right ahead. You're unmuted. You're welcome to speak.
From Austria, not the election, but from my point of view, it's oppositely. Yeah, on the left side, all emotions are combined with a more sympathetic tone, and on the right side, it's stimulating the parasympathicus.
Interesting.
Right
All right.
side,
Yeah.
exhale and feeling well. On the left side, you're feeling discomfort. And what we need now in the world, and especially with the elections, is enhancing the right side and being more trustful in German angst. And therefore, I think it's about vagal tonus, and the vagal tone, and that's all on the right side.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. For those of you who don't know, Alfred is the physician who is behind Autonom Health, which is the heart rate variability monitor that a few of us are wearing and exploring, and we'll be sharing that all with you guys in the weeks to come. Yeah, so Alfred, what time is it for you? It's like dinner time. So, yeah. So, yeah.
Conversations.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Okay, so I think we're going to revisit this particular chart when we start talking a little bit about getting our strategy together. Maybe now that I'm seeing there are 12 of these, perhaps it could be interesting to build a ChangeGrid activity list around these 12. So we'll give that a little bit of thoughts and see if that's something that would actually work. Okay, now the next one I just wanted to quickly share with you guys, because we'll be returning to this one in detail, was the one that we looked at last time around. This particular one is the only one that seems to lay out as a continuum. I'm sorry about the jets are going over. Don't know if you can hear that or not.
Yep.
But because Linda's also on her phone, so you might be able to hear her because she's unmuted as well. Yeah, anyway. So this one is laid out as a continuum, but again, I'm not convinced that it goes top to bottom, side to side on the change grid. And we do think the ones that are shown here in the middle belong to the tips of the pedals. So we are going to return to this in greater depth a bit later. But I wanted to just quickly go through these remaining ones so you can see where it's all coming from and going to. Now, this is a marketing company. Their name is Martec, M-A-R-T-E-C. If you go to their website, just do a Google for Martec, M-A-R-T-E-C, you'll see quite a bit. Somehow or another, they created a diagram for if you're trying to develop any kind of marketing or advertising, you want to look at what it is you're trying to stimulate in the individual. And then these are the 16, is that what it is? No, it looks like 32. The 32 emotions you're actually trying to trigger. And so there are pleasant and unpleasant, active and passive. So I think that that overlays very much with what we were seeing, how these were all put together, this one and this one as well. So, but I thought that's interesting. They're using it for another reason. But again, there are some that feel like they could fit on a continuum, but loyalty and contempt are not neighbors. Kindness and anger are not neighbors. So it falls apart as far as the ease with which it can be overlaid when we look at it in this configuration. I also showed you this one about survival issues. And again, this goes back to these 8 petals that we were looking at, but now they're going to like, well, how does this all work if you're talking about survival issues? And we talked a little bit about how the stimulus event triggers us to have some sort of cognitive appraisal of what's going on. That gives us a subjective reaction, which is one of these emotions, which then leads to a behavioral reaction in order to provide us with some sort of function. And I thought this is interesting, and I could see how I might use this in any kind of my discussions with clients. So if they say, well, something unexpected happened, they encountered that. They asked what they felt surprised. The behavioral reaction was to stop because they needed to gain time to orient themselves to what's going on. So I thought this is very interesting. But again, I feel like it's going to be incomplete because this seems to be targeted only towards survival issues. So I wish I could figure out who put this together, because I'd like to say, what other issues might you have created such? Because the subjective reaction should be the same based on the number of petals, unless they're saying that these petals only apply to survival issues. So we need to do a little bit deeper digging on that one. Now, these last 3, I just wanted to quickly show you, have a little bit more going on that could be a little bit fun. So now here we have this, looks like a bit of a continuum. So now they're saying that these are the 8 emotions across the top: contempt, discomfort, dread, sorrow, no. Serenity, amazement, joy, and loyalty. This is the time for the ChangeWorks. Oh, Jeff, yeah, go right ahead and share that. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to share that openly.
Hi, this is Jeff. I've just been thinking from the whole time of talking about this that right now, with 40% of people experiencing depression in a way that they've never really experienced, the ChangeWorks community has an opportunity, sadly, from a business development perspective, but more justly from a community assistance perspective, to establish a platform of, this is one of the ways that you can understand what you're going through. And historically, we've been speaking to our individual societies from an individual perspective, as opposed to, hey, everybody, jump on board. Let's understand this and learn more about this. And here's 1,000 hours of information that you can consume by yourself on your own time frame.
From, right. Well, you know, Jeff, that's very much what we're trying to do now on the YouTube channel. And so again, just to kind of tell people the shape of the reasoning behind having ChangeGrids automatically sent to respondents as an option. It's not automatic. You have to say, do that. Is that I think it would be great to be able to say to everyone on YouTube, fill this profile out, and then here on YouTube are all of these videos you can watch that are interpreting what your results mean on that specific activity. And so every activity will end up having its very own video. And so by the time you have a dozen or so different ChangeGrids that people could look at with a dozen or so different activities on each one of them, you're looking at 150, or, you know, an ever-growing base of ChangeGrid experiences individuals can have, and ways that they can get an interpretation from that. And so that's what I want to build. And that's why I said this first one has got to be about how this election result is going to dramatically and immediately impact. And then it's going to continue. It's going to linger to inauguration in January and beyond. So I think we really do need to do this. And so fingers crossed that the developers addition to our capabilities will work, and the tests will work well, so we can just mobilize this and get it out there. And I will be asking all of you guys to broadcast this to your entire databases, your entire mailing lists, just so we can all get together. And when we're doing those interpretive readings for each activity, I'm more than happy to be joined by any and all of you on those interpretation calls. I figured if for each activity we could interpret in, say, 15, 20 minutes instead of an hour, that's something very watchable, and people can immediately get to whatever their results are. And again, each one of those videos ends with the suggestion of options the person has now. They can watch more videos, they can take more of these ChangeGrids. They can reach out to any one of you for an in-depth reading of that particular ChangeGrid, or better yet, engage your services to create a custom ChangeGrid. And then they can, of course, step up into higher levels of learning if that's what they want to do for themselves. So we really do hope that that will be one way, at least, that we can do big reach out, have a viral growth opportunity for everyone who's involved. But, I've always believed if we do a good job of taking care of the world will take care of us. And call me naive if you must, but that's my belief. Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
I think that's brilliant. But what I'm concerned about, and why I think is vitally important, is because if 40% of the population is suffering from some kind of depression,
yeah,
you leave that symptom to manifest itself. Now you're doing the same thing that the virus is doing. You're going to overwhelm the medical system because people are going to get sick.
In fact, that's exactly what they're saying, that it's going to overwhelm, first and foremost, mental health and community health professionals. And then all the physical manifestations will come along, and that will put even greater burden on an already overtaxed medical community. Yeah, it's just, it's very, very unfortunate. about how it's all coming together. But I was just trying to do a little search for that article. So very SSO, and just one second, and I'll see if I can quickly find this. It was in the
Looking,
news.
if you don't mind me adding that, I think
Yes.
that the opportunity is, in the last 10 years, we've come up with so many, and you started the meeting with your list of the map. We've medicated ourselves to the limit that we can, and now the stress is overwhelming that equilibrium that we were able to solve vaguely in a more calm environment. Now that everything's exploded and we're all coming back to equilibrium from our own vantage point, opioids aren't gonna help. It's time to engage, and
Absolutely.
the ChangeGrid is a phenomenal way to understand yourself first, understand your environment second, and then understand what to do about it all.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I definitely think that we have a role, and we just need to get ourselves ready to do that. Exactly. And yeah, the fact that there's opportunity that comes along with it, okay, that's fine. But let's let our focus be being of service to those who are really, really needing it. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah,
let's
I
end
might
on.
just
Go ahead.
change catalyst. So for me, that's is part of a duty in a way.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's let me think about this for just a second. The other ones I wanted to show you are just fun ones, but let me leave you with one fun one, and we can pick up our discussion on Tuesday, where we'll get into the adjective map. But I thought this was interesting. How many of you remember the movie Inside Out? Remember this one where they were inside of it's an animated movie,
One of the best
Pixar did?
ones.
Yeah. Well, they decided where all the emotions come from, because someone asked, are those 5 characters in Inside Out complete? So joy, sadness, disgust, fear, and anger. And as you start to blend them together, this ends up being all the emotional overlaps in Inside Out. So joy on top of joy is ecstasy. And if you have joy and disgust, that's intrigue. So I thought this is a fun little way. Sometimes it's the most useful models we stumble across were done for purely entertainment purposes. Yeah, so there you go. We might take a look at that later, but just kind of know that, in fact, I have a little poem that I'll share with you guys.
I love this.
Yeah, it's called, well, you'll see where it all fits in. So the poem is called Forest of Algae and Ivy. And very short, goes like this. I have walked through a forest of algae and ivy. I've walked up a mountain of rocks and regrets. Yet I see from the summit a sunset of fire and peace in the valley of life drifting yet. I think that's where we are right now. We have to recognize that we are lost in this forest of algae and ivy, and we're dealing with these hurdles filled with rocks and regrets. But what we need to do is focus on what the positive outcome will be. And if we can do that, and one of the things that I learned early on in my life was that this was the phrase I was taught: the worst that anyone can do to you is inconvenience you. So it doesn't matter what the situation is. Feel free to come up with any extreme example you want. What we want to do is, when we're noticing that, is just say, well, how inconvenient. But all that is inconvenient. And if we decide that it is more than inconvenient, we are bestowing upon that situation characteristics that want to say distort it. We just want to say, it's inconvenient. So everything we're going through, coronavirus, how inconvenient. Now that I frame it in that way, what can I do to have more of a positive impact? What can I do to find that peace in the valley of life drifting yet? And so that's hopefully where the spirit of all this is really taking us to. It's kind of like, this too shall pass. So let's learn what we need to learn, let's do what needs to be done, but let's not believe that anything is forever. So this is inconvenient, and maybe it's an inconvenient week, maybe it's an inconvenient month, maybe it's an inconvenient decade, but it's inconvenient. And we can certainly improve upon whatever that happens to be, learn from it and be better because of it.
And we can help.
And we can help. That's the whole idea. You know, if nothing else, can we take what we've learned and use it to help ourselves? Because, you know, we're not immune. We're going to have our own reactions, our own responses, our own ick to deal with. So what can we do to help ourselves? Which again goes back to those ChangeGrid profiles, those videos. We're calling that series the Oracle of the Self, because we want people to be able to talk to themselves about themselves. Again, the Oracle of the Self was originally going to be people physically getting together in small groups in their households or whatever. Coronavirus changed that possibility. So we had to think creatively about a way to create that sense of community and communicate that awareness that people can benefit from having when they understand, you know, that they're talking to the ChangeGrid is you talking to you about you. How can you better hold conversations with yourself? Okay, with that, any other comments you guys want to throw out?
Who's the author of that poem?
Oh, well, her name, I was trying to remember, just one second. Forest of Algae and Ivy. You know, I'll look it up, because the sad thing is that she was someone that I worked with in a job at the very beginning of life. Oh, Nancy Fate.
Oh.
Nancy Fate, Nancy, Fate, Fate. And she was working with the prison population on creative writing, doing some volunteer work. And so she was always trying to get the inmates to write little poems. And one of the books that she wrote, very small little book, was called Forest of Algae and Ivy. And that's what that poem is all about. So Nancy Fate. Yep. Okay, well, thanks everybody very much for joining in. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will pick up where we left off next week. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.